Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back into OTRAM's YouTube channel. Today I thought I would show you doing pads and rotors on, I believe this is an 06 LX470, but it'd be the same for 100 series. I realized we haven't done many of the basic maintenance videos, so I thought I would start shooting those as they come through. So let me move the camera around so you can see what we're doing taking the caliper off, and I'll bring you right back. Okay, so it's kind of hard to get you to where you can see the backside of the caliper because there's not a whole lot of room in there for the camera. But the first thing we're going to do is take this dust shield off, which is two 8mm bolts, or 8mm headed bolts, right here. Pop those off real quick, and then that'll give us access to the two 14mm headed bolts that hold the actual caliper on. And so the top one came free. The bottom one is going to fight. So the bottom one here wants to fight. There's a 17mm flat on the other side of this pin. So if it wants to spin, you can put a wrench on it. It's got to be a kind of thin 17. But a lot of times you'll need it to get those off. And then you can just wiggle the caliper up off, and I'm going to set it off to the side here for a minute. And then we can get to the two 17mm bolts that hold the actual caliper bracket on. And normally I'd be using an electric ratchet for this, but that's so loud on the video. And we'll get the top one out and drop it. And then the bottom one comes out. And there's a washer on each of these to keep track of. And then I'll bring you back around to the front. Okay, so now that we've got the rotor and the caliper bracket off out of the way, and this one actually lines up to where it's already there, there's this hole in the bottom of the rotor. Well, we want it at the bottom of the rotor, because inside there is the adjuster wheel for the parking brake. And you just got to kind of feel around in there with a screwdriver. And then you can work the adjuster around. Come on. There it is. And I just went the wrong way and tightened it. But that's okay, because now we know. And we're going to go all the way the other way to retract the parking brake shoes. If you don't, and there's a lip in the rotor, if there's a lip inside here, you'll pull the shoes and you'll pull them off the hardware and ruin the hardware in there. And you can't really see it, but down here there's a a threaded adjuster that you're grabbing on, and that's what you're actually threading. So their rotor's off. We're gonna do a quick look in here. It looks like this has got relatively new hardware, relatively new shoes, no axle leaks, so we're happy there. Then we're gonna take our pads and our caliper bracket. We're gonna pull the pads out. And then there's a bunch of stainless steel shims that are clipped into the caliper. We're gonna pop all those out. We're gonna put those in the ultrasonic to clean them up. And then all these grooves here where the pads ride, you can take a file, a wire brush, something like that, and clean those up. I'm gonna go put them in the media blast cabinet and bead blast them to make sure they're clean. This one's not bad looking, but you'll get rust buildup between the caliper bracket and that steel shim, and that'll tighten up on the actual pad and keep it from sliding properly. So I'm gonna go clean this up to make sure we've got good pad movement. And then here, be careful not to tear the boot. These pins come out. I'm gonna, same thing, put these pins in the ultrasonic cleaner. And I'm gonna take this wire brush and I'm gonna stick it down here and, oops, well, I'm gonna pull the whole boot off, but clean the bore out real well so when we put it back together with new grease, everything slides nicely and doesn't bind. So let me go clean all this stuff up and then I'll bring you back for reassembly. Okay, so we've got everything cleaned up and now we can start reassembling. So first thing I'm gonna do is take my new rotor, and I've already cleaned the pad surface and the shoe surface. I'm gonna take this guy, put it on there, and then for now, I'm just gonna put 3 lug nuts on there. If I can get that to start. And I just want them on there just loosely, just to hold my rotor on square. And then I'm gonna go back to that same adjustment hole, find my adjuster, and there, I just ran out of adjustment, and my parking brake is all the way on. So now, I can come in here and back it off like 4 notches. Maybe 1 more. There we go. I just want to make sure I don't hear the shoes dragging inside there. So now my rotor is on, my parking brake's adjusted, and I can come back here to my caliper bracket and pull these pins back out and grease them. Oops. So I'm just going to clean all the old grease off, and I already brushed the bores out off camera when I was cleaning the rest of the bracket. And then I'm just going to take some brake caliper grease and just lightly coat this pin. Like so. Stick it back in its bore, and when you put it back in, you want to make sure that the boot is all the way seated here at the edge, and then make sure that it moves freely. And then we can pop the other one out, and the other one will usually be a little bit stiffer because it's got like a rubber pad on it. So same thing, just gonna clean that one off. And give it a nice coat of grease. And then we'll stick it back in, making sure that we lock into the boot and that it can move freely. And then, trying to get a good angle for you here, where all these shims were, you can see where I've sandblasted that all clean. I'm going to take just a real light coating of grease in there too, just to try to slow down corrosion from forming in between the shim and the caliper bracket. And I got a little bit much on that first one, so we're just going to spread it around. Make sure you get all the surfaces coated. And then I've got my shims out of the parts washer, or ultrasonic rather. And you'll notice, see if it'll focus, there's a flat side and a hooked side, like that's springy. The hooked side goes to the outside. And then you've got to kind of fiddle with these and figure out which hole each of them goes in. And when you get them lined up, it'll be kind of obvious. So we'll go through and we'll stick all of those in. So we've got all our shims in there. And I left my pads over here. And I find it easier to go ahead and stick my pads in the bracket before I put the caliper or the bracket on the truck. Okay, so the first time around, I put the shims in backwards, which was making it kind of difficult to put the pads in. When you put the shims in the right way around, the pads are much easier to slip in. So we'll get those in there, kind of eyeball up the gap of the rotor, and then lightly slide them home. And then we can take our caliper bracket bolts. I like to put a dab of blue Loctite on them. And these were those 17mm headed bolts with the washers. We're going to put in there first. Try to not completely block your view. And then those on this truck torqued to 76 foot-pounds, and you're going to want to check, your specific vehicle and model to, be sure you're doing the right torque spec, because they do change on occasion. There's one. And on brakes, I always like to hit the bolts twice, just to be sure I've got everything seated. we go. And then we can retract our caliper. So I'm going to put the two old pads back in there. And I'm going to put this down in between them. And then as you tighten this, it spreads them apart. And while you're retracting the pad, first off, before you start doing this, you want to make sure that there's room in the master cylinder for the fluid to go back. I checked this one before I started. I've already done the other side. And you want to make sure that the pad retracts smoothly without, or the caliper retracts smoothly without binding. There we go. And then we can slide this guy back over. And you just want to make sure that you didn't twist up the hose. We're going to put a little blue Loctite on the caliper bolts. And we'll line those up with the end of those pins. Get them started by hand. And then on this truck, these torque to 20 foot-pounds. And now that we've had all this apart and clean, you'll probably need to use your 17mm wrench to back that pin up and keep it from spinning. And like I said, you need a skinny 17 for this. Just double checking. And there we go. And then you just want to make sure that your caliper slides easily on those pins. And you're done back here. Take the lug nuts off, put the wheel back on, make sure you torque it in a crisscross pattern. Before you go to drive and put the truck in drive, hit the brake pedal a few times to push the piston back out against the pads. Otherwise, the first time you hit the brakes, it's going to go to the floor because you're going to have to take up all that travel. And you're going to want to check your parking brake to make sure your adjustment's right. If you drive and you hear parking brake noise, you're going to want to loosen it a hair. If you set the parking brake and it doesn't hold, then you need to tighten it a hair. They can be kind of finicky to get set where you want them. And then you're also going to want to check your brake fluid level. Make sure you're not too high up in the master. Make sure you're not spilling over after you've done the calipers and reset everything. And then you also want to clean off the outside of the rotor where you've touched it. With some brake clean. Anyway, quick how-to on 100 series LX470 rear pads and rotors. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please like and subscribe below. And I also wanted to put a note in, we're known for Land Cruisers, but we do all Toyota, Lexus vehicles and Subaru. So if you're in the Northern Virginia area and you're looking for a shop, give us a call. Anyway, hope you found that useful, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks. Okay, so a little add-on back at the end of the video, now that I've already started putting everything away. Realized the little dust brake, or the dust shield, still sitting on my bench because I got distracted shooting a video. So anyway, that goes back on there with the two little 8mm headed bolts and just snugged up. Come on. So now we're finished with the video. Didn't want anybody making comments down below that I forgot to do that. Okay, now I'll see you later.